Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 119 of the Truth and Consequences podcast from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm your host, Doug Poppa. It's Thursday, May 26th, 2022. As you all know, I'm an independent investigative journalist, former law enforcement officer, casino executive. That is Captain Michael Gennaro. That's Gennaro. And Michael Genero is the captain in charge of the Internal Affairs Bureau right now. Mr. Genero, Captain Genero, okay? A lot of cops familiar with Michael Genero. Like I said, he heads the Internal Affairs Bureau. Question to me, and this is new information I got recently, is why the hell this guy's running Internal Affairs? Because in that position. Because according to what I'm told, he has a questionable history on Metro, and I guess he's been on Metro since like 1998. But I want you to listen to some of this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, because some of it sounds a little far-fetched, but remember I said the other day in the podcast, talking about the criminal intelligence section, that I've heard over the years they've done some criminal stuff that was against the law, things they should have done. And we'll talk about more in another podcast. But this is just some of the stuff here that I was told by sources familiar with Michael Genero over the years. Now, according to what I was told, I want you to listen to this. Back in the day, we're going back like in the 90s now, okay, 2000, when Bill Young was the sheriff of Clark County, Genero was in the criminal intelligence section at that time. And the sergeant, I guess, in there was a gentleman named Will Scott, who's now a retired captain. Now, according to what sources are telling me, is that when Genero and Scott were in criminal intelligence section, then Sheriff Bill Young pulled him in the office. And ladies and gentlemen, this is coming from sources. I'm not making this stuff up, okay? And I'm reading here what they're telling me. And Sheriff Young ordered them to break into the hotel suite, which I believe they told me it was at the Palms Hotel Casino at the time, of then Death Row Records, the producer, you remember him, Suge Knight, okay? Suge Knight, he's now in prison, I think for murder, attempted murder or something. But according to what I was told, Genero bragged to detectives that they were told to do that. And Genero, according to sources, said him and Will Scott did do that. They burglarized the hotel room of Suge Knight, who was not in at the time, and they knew that, okay? Now, according to what I was told, both Genero and Scott sat there and bragged to other detectives later on that they drank Suge Knight's liquor and smoked his cigars. They sat there with their guns out. There came a time when Suge Knight and his entourage returned to the suite. And from what I was told, the way it was described to me, there was sort of a Mexican standoff. Everybody was pulling guns. Of course, they identified themselves as Metro detectives. And what I was told was they told Suge Knight and his party, we have a message from our sheriff, basically, get the fuck out of town. You're not welcome here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I was told. And I've heard that from other cops for years, even before I started writing for the Baltimore Post-Examiner and, did these podcasts. I've heard that for years. But since this thing started now with this full-blown supposed investigation that's going on, because Lombardo's trying to find out who's been leaking information to me. And cops have been leaking information to me for years. I mean, he knows that. When I did all the stories for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, for years. But he's upset because, he's running for governor. He's afraid some things are going to come out. And he's also protecting his cohort who's running for sheriff, another documented liar and pervert, corrupt former undersheriff, Kevin McMahill, retired undersheriff, running for Clark County Sheriff, with two other guys who were running, retired Assistant Sheriff Tom Roberts and retired Sergeant Stan Height. So, so anyway, that's what I was told. I can imagine this right now. Now, was that, a bravado, bragging? But cops say it happened, and that's the way he relayed it to them, detectives, and they told me about it. One detective said, and I'll explain why he said this to me, okay? The analogy when they discuss Michael Genero was, quote, he knows where the bodies are buried, unquote. And apparently, according to them, Genero must have forgotten about all his past misdeeds, since now he's the captain of the Internal Affairs Bureau and is investigating cops, okay? So this is what sources are telling me. Why did they say that? I hope to God not really where the bodies are buried. That's just using that analogy. But who knows what's been going on for years in this department. Now, like I said, Michael Genero was in criminal intelligence, and at some point in time, he got booted out of the criminal intelligence section, okay? According to sources who spoke to me, Genero went to, I think he was deputy chief at the time. He's now retired. Guy's name was Jett, Gett. And when he realized he's getting booted out of criminal intelligence, he went to Jett and he told them that if they don't put him in the unit where he has a take-home car, he doesn't have to do calls for service, that, according to what I was told, Genero told Jett if he didn't get a position like that, since he's getting booted out of criminal intelligence, that he was going to go to Action 13 News and tell them all the dirty stuff that was going on in the criminal intelligence section and within Metro. And then I was told, much to the dismay, Michael Genero was then transferred into what's called the ROPE unit, which is called the Repeat Offender Program, where they follow repeat offenders, try to catch them in the act, they do all that kind of stuff. And they couldn't figure out why to get booted out of criminal intelligence is pretty serious, and why this guy is now putting into another specialized unit when other people, cops want to get in there. So he went into the ROPE unit, I think around the end of, I don't know, I got it over here, the date. That's not important, but during his tenure. And because he threatened that he was going to unload on all the dirty stuff going on in Metro. And like I said, and he moved up to the rank to sergeant, lieutenant, and is now the captain in charge of internal affairs. Now, according to cops familiar with Michael Genero during his tenure in these units, they said that when he was in criminal intelligence, he never put in for a vacation slip, and he even bragged about it to other cops. He would just take days off when he wanted, and he had thousands of dollars all the time on his person and never accounted for most of the flash money. That's what it's used for different undercover operations, from what I'm being told, that he never accounted for it when he was in the intelligence unit, okay? And even after the unit, when he went to the ROPE and this stuff, I guess cops always saw him with a lot of money on him, and they were questioning that. So this is what they're telling me, folks. I'm not making this stuff up, okay? I have no reason. I don't know this guy, okay? They told me that he's a former New York City cop, told me he was in some shootout early in his career and left, and then came over here to the LVMPD. I have people in New York checking on that, and I'll update you in a future podcast. Now, here's another instance where I guess a bunch of detectives in one of his houses years ago helped him bring in a huge humidor. People know what a humidor is. It's one of those air-conditioned units that they put cigars in. And they helped him move it into his house. And he bragged that there were, I heard everything from upwards of $30,000 worth of cigars in the humidor. Now, one of the people told me that they couldn't figure out how a guy on a salary of a Metro cop back then could afford, all this money that he always had on him and 30,000 upwards worth of cigars in a humidor. But that went into his house. And I was told the other day, one of the sources told me, he says, we kind of just figured it out. When you are whining, and this is their comments, not mine. When you are whining and dining all of these big wigs with all these undercover operations and stuff. And he keeps saying, meaning Genero, that he doesn't have to account for the money. Well, I guess you can afford it, meaning the cigar collection. That's what cop told me. Okay? Now, another incident here. There's a lot what they told me on this guy. I'm not going to talk about everything. And let me get this guy's picture up on the screen again. That's him. That's Michael Gennaro, Captain of Internal Affairs. Now, Captain Genero, as other cops, I'm on bottom, I say all the time, if you want to call me up and you want to sit down and do an interview, I would sure like to interview you, especially to see what you had that you were going to unload to Action 13 about stuff that was going on in the criminal intelligence section in the police department. If indeed, if you want to deny it, then you have the right to do that. But you know how you can get in touch with me. Okay? Listen, here's another thing. I guess around 2013, 2014, there was a squad Christmas party. And it's my understanding, talking to these sources, that this happened while the squad, and I think it was the repeat offender program squad detectives, they were on duty. Well, Genero set up, according to what I was told, Genero set up, he was a detective at the time, I believe in the rope unit, set up a Christmas party at the Spearmint Rhino Gentlemen's Club here in Las Vegas. It's a stripper club, topless bar, okay? I've never been in it. I don't know if it's topless, bottomless, I don't know. But anyway, Spearmint Rhino Gentlemen's Club. And the squad went in there. And they end up getting, and this was not an undercover thing. This was known. These guys were cops when they were in there. But Genero set it up and got a comp table for the cops, and I heard upwards of $5,000 worth of comp liquor that night that they didn't have to pay for. And there were some strippers there. I understand the boys had a good night. They had some fun. It's like one of the detectives used a phrase to me, Joseph Wambaugh's choir boys. I got nothing on some of the cops in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. But getting back to this Spearmint Rhino party. So they told me that obviously Genero had connections from his days in criminal intelligence and had some connection at the Spearmint Rhino. And another cop told me, because you do know that the Spearmint Rhino Club around 2013, 2014 was the territory for prostitution that was run by Jamal Rashid, a.k.a. Molly Mall, who's now in prison. And I talked about that in podcasts, and I got more stuff coming up on that. And there's something else going to happen that it's not for me to say, but something you're going to hear more about Jamal Rashid and the corrupt Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department pimp investigating team from years ago. And that's all I'm going to say on that. But anyway, getting back to this party. So I guess they all had a good time. And some of them cops were allegedly messing with the strippers. And this was supposedly on county time. I guess there was one of the sergeants that was there and said later on that Genero had $3,000 he took out of his own money out of the bank. So anyway, this is troubling if all this indeed is true. Now, why am I saying that? Now, other sources that I spoke to, okay, have told me, now maybe people are pissed at this guy because he's in charge of internal affairs, okay, but I've been hearing stuff about this guy for years from different cops. So maybe they're pissed at him because he's internal affairs and now he's, burning other cops and involved in this investigation. And they're saying, well, what about everything that he did supposedly when he was doing bad deeds, alleged bad deeds, according to these police sources. But, so that's what we have here. But, my thing is this, other people that I talked to told me, and even some of these sources that spoke to me, is that Michael Genero was probably one of the best, if not the best, undercover officer the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department ever had, and did a lot of undercover work, and I heard he did a lot of good stuff, okay? And I worked for years, I told you, undercover, and I'll talk about something here at the end of the podcast, too, about that, because somebody said something the other day, and I got to straighten it out. But, you got to look at it this way. When you're in an undercover role, I did it. You have flash money. You're hanging out with bad guys. You're hanging out in bars. You're hanging out in nightclubs. So there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you don't go over the line and get used to that type of lifestyle and then you start, and I'm not saying it happened in this case, you start misappropriating flash money. You get enamored in this with the women and stuff, and then you start going over the edge, and that's how you become a bad cop. I'm not saying it happened in this case. I'm just saying that happens. But I did hear that he was a good undercover officer. As a matter of fact, somebody told me, and I didn't know this, and I researched it online because his name is mentioned in one or two articles, is that a couple of years ago we had the son of a judge out here who basically robbed the Bellagio casino, I think, of $1 million worth of chips. Anyway, long story short, you can get online and research it. But Michael Gennaro, at the time, I think he was in the rope unit still. He was out of criminal intelligence. He volunteered to go undercover and find out where the suspect hung out and make friends with him, because that's what you do in undercover. And I guess it was successful. And Genero was the one that actually got some of the $25,000 chips back and made the arrest because of his undercover work. So, and I look at it this way, I don't know anything about this guy, but, I mean, you look at him over here, Gennero's his last name. I'm Italian. Okay. He's Italian. People say he's a cop in New York. Sometimes people put all this stuff together and they say, the guy's probably corrupt. Okay. But, because I went through that when I was in Loudoun, in Loudoun County, the sheriff's office, and, down south. Who's this guy from New York coming down here? And, everybody from New York, Goombas, and I heard all that, the good old boys and all this type of stuff, but, it wasn't true. So, but anyway, I heard he was a good cop, good undercover cop. So we have a couple of things in common. Never was a crook, and I'm not saying he was a crooked cop, and I'm just saying I never was, but I'm saying, we were both from New York City. I worked years undercover, and so did he. So if all this other stuff that they're telling me is true, it is disturbing. And if it's not true, then I think, he should come out and talk like these other cops. I talk, and nobody comes out to talk. So you call up, you leave messages for some of these people, and they never call you back because they're not allowed per department policy to talk, and to me, it's that's the way it is. So anyway, that's a story on Michael. I hope it's not true because, I did hear he was, and actually somebody told me the other day, he goes, Doug, he wasn't one of the best undercover cops Metro ever had. He was the best. That's what I was told. And people got to understand something. There are police officers, patrol. They get promoted. They go into detectives units. They work homicide. They work burglaries, work property crimes. Okay? But working undercover is a totally separate, it's a totally separate thing. Not every cop can work undercover. They don't have the character, the mentality, the smarts to deal with criminals. It's not like you're a detective interviewing a criminal. I did this for years. Okay, you're with them. You infiltrate them. You go in. You want to buy the narcotics. You want to buy the guns, explosives, whatever it is that you're going after, stolen property. It takes a special kind of police officer to do that kind of work. And it cost me my marriage because I was married to the job. So I look at this when I hear different things because if you haven't worked undercover, and then people hear, we always had money on him and this. Well, of course you had money on him. But you work undercover. You have to have flash money. You go out, you're drinking, you go in bars, you buy drinks for people. That's not your own money. So I'm just bringing that up because undercover assignments, not every cop can work undercover. Some of the greatest people that work in homicide in these other cases, they do great work, but they never want to work undercover and they can't. They don't have what it takes. And I'll talk about more of that in another podcast when I get into some of the stuff that I did. Anyway, I hope what these guys are telling me is not true, but if it is, it's disturbing to say the least.